Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pink 'Un for this week's episode of Terrace Talk. Norwich City are finally on the board at Carrow Road, but they're still awaiting a win, and they'll be hoping to get their first of the season against QPR in a quick turnaround for Saturday's game. I'm delighted to be joined by Conor from Hoopsar to chat about that game, about QPR's start to the season, and kind of see how it might pan out when they travel to Carrow Road. Conor, first of all, thanks very much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about QPR's start to the season so far.
Yeah, thank you for having me. First of all, it's really good to be on. Yeah, it's been an interesting start to the season for QPR. It was a very tricky start to August. No wins in the first three. Obviously, a heavy defeat to Coventry, which doesn't look so bad when you consider the thumpings they've handed out to other teams since. But it was certainly a bit of a turning point that was needed for Rangers. They then went six unbeaten, went into the sort of first international break of the season, first or second, in sixth, which is the highest Rangers fans have seen us in years. Immediately followed that between the next international break with a run of four defeats, one win, and one draw. So, it's very much the topsy-turvy nature of the championship. But coming straight back out of the latest international break, and thankfully the last until March now, it's been back-to-back wins. So it's definitely been a bit of a roller coaster so far. But I think after spending the last couple of seasons of sort of circling the drain a little bit, it's nice to be mid-table and looking upwards. So long may that continue.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about kind of the context going into it, because probably from outside, I think a lot of people were looking at the kind of drama there was with Marti Fuentes last season, the fact that Julian Stefan had come in, obviously with no championship experience, so that probably a few kind of unknowables, and a lot of people, given QPR had been for a couple of years circling the drain, as you put it, maybe even had them in the sort of position that Norwich now find themselves in, to be honest. So even though they're 12th now, it's been kind of inconsistent, as you kind of mapped out there. Do you think you and most QPR fans would have taken that going into the season, or no?
I would say so. I think that the last couple of seasons, as I say, have been circling the drain. We've been a very sort of patchy team for a few seasons now. It's been a couple of changes of manager as well. Obviously, as you mentioned, Marti Cifuentes departed at the end of last season after sort of 18 months in charge, which was a bit of a surprise, I guess, with the timing of it. I guess in the longer run, it seems to be a bit of a disagreement behind the scenes. Our kind of CEO and him not seeing quite eye to eye. But I think for me and a lot of QPR fans, this season was about building on, a lower to mid-table finish last season and trying to finish higher than that and progressing and seeing progress within our squad. Now, that doesn't sound particularly ambitious, especially considering QPR have been in the championship for
Yeah.
10 years now. But, we want to see some progress in terms of looking up the table rather than down. And I think roughly, if you look at where we are right now, sitting in 12, that we're probably on track for that. How and where we end up is a different story. And I think the patchiness suggests there will be a lot more twists and turns to come.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Stefan before. You kind of mentioned also the him coming in and the changes of manager there's been at Loftus Road. I mean, what do you make of Stefan as a manager? I mean, you've spoken a little bit about how this season kind of matches up to your expectations, but in terms of the role that Stefan has played, his football, and how he's received by fans, what have you made of him as a character since he's come in?
Yeah, he's an interesting one. He's very different to Marty Cifuentes in that the one thing Marty always had going for him is he learned a lot about the club very quickly, and he endeared himself into the fans in
Yeah.
understanding our history, understanding this type of play that we like to see. I think Stefan is a very different character in that he's much more professional, much calmer. There's not as much emotion behind things. That's not to say that he's totally emotionless, but he's a lot harder to read as a
Yeah.
coach. The shape hasn't differed massively to what we've seen last season. We're playing a sort of a 4-2-3-1. The thing that is interesting is that for the majority of the games since Richard Kone and Roman Burrell signed, he's played the pair of them on the pitch together with Richard Kone dropped into the 10.
Yeah.
And that's something that he's been quite wedded to. So we've not really seen a massive difference in the system. What I have found interesting is when we have been going through sort of badder spells in the season, tricky opening month, the sort of 6 games before the international break, it's looked at times like he is, struggling a little bit with getting used to this sort of 3 game schedule. But
Yeah.
you have seen that he's making small alterations which do sort of solve some of the problems. And that's the thing I've been impressed with, particularly since we've come back from the latest international break. There were some problems to resolve. He's made a couple of adjustments in terms of the players that are playing, the roles that they're playing, swapped some players about in different positions, and it seems to have produced some results. So I'm sort of quietly impressed so far. I find it hard to sort of relay exactly what his style of play is. It doesn't
Yeah.
differ massively to what we were playing last season, but he is finding solutions, and I think that is really important in a league where the games come thick and fast.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose it makes it interesting for an opposition team and kind of trying to work out what Norwich fans maybe can expect and what the sort of Norwich coaching team will be looking at, trying to almost take advantage of, or what they need to be wary of going into it. If there isn't kind of a clear style of play, then and that's kind of interesting. But if it was you, if you were in the shoes of the Norwich team and you were looking at maybe some weaknesses to exploit, what would you pick out from what you've seen so far this season?
I mean, our weaknesses at the moment are in the back line. I say that, off of the back of QPR keeping a clean sheet away at Blackburn on Wednesday
Yeah.
night, but it is sort of basic errors in the defence that have been causing us to lose games. And I would emphasise the word basic. It's
Yeah.
I might be biased, but I've not seen many goals against us this season where I sort of go, wow, that's an amazing bit of play. It's normally a player giving the ball away, misreading a pass, misreading the game that leads to it. We have also had a bit of an issue with goalkeepers this season. So going into this season, Paul Nardi, who was signed the summer before last and was our number one for all of last season, he was dropped to the bench in favour of a young goalkeeper, Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh obviously had a bit of a torrid time at the start of the season with some of the defeats that we had. Mysteriously fractured his wrist at that point, and then has been out recovering ever since. That meant that Paul Nardi was called upon once again. And the strange thing about Nardi is he's a really good shot stopper, but the rest of his game is really below average. And
Yeah.
I think towards the end of last season, there was a feeling that his inability to deal with crosses coming into the box was something that was being targeted more and more. And that is what a lot of people think is the reasoning behind him being dropped in the first place. And so while he came in and started to do a decent job over time, and particularly over the past kind of run of games before the international break, he was making more and more mistakes, and you could just see the confidence disappearing. So that meant just before the international break, 38-year-old Ben Hamer, who we signed on a free, came into the side for his Queen's Park Rangers debut, kept a clean sheet away at Bramall Lane. Was a little bit more suspect in the Hull City game, the 3-2, but he did make a cracking save to keep us coming away with all 3 points. But at the start of the Blackburn game, 10 minutes in, Steve Cook took him out chasing a loose ball, and Paul Nardi was called upon once again
Yeah.
and is now back in the side. And it was a head injury, so I'm assuming that Ben Hamer won't be coming back into the team for Saturday. So there is a bit of a question mark over Paul Nardi. He did really well in the minutes that he came on against Blackburn, but he has been dropped for mistakes in the past. And that's going to be where the weakness lies, I think.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see which twists and turns that goalkeeping drama takes next for QPR. It definitely sounds like it's been a lot to deal with. I mean, in front of him, there was a specific player I wanted to ask you about. I'm usually looking for kind of those who have played for both clubs, and I think an interesting one going into this weekend is Isaac Hayden, who was obviously, I think he was on loan at both clubs actually before he went to QPR permanently. Played for Norwich about 3 years ago now, I think. And although I think he showed the signs of a player who was decent in the tackle, who had probably the best work rate and the sort of character and personality that maybe you need in the dressing room, he clearly was struggling with injuries and had done for years, really. It looked like he'd lost a bit of mobility. And I think if you'd asked me at that point, will he be playing in the Championship in 3 years' time, I might have said that might be a bit of a stretch, to be honest. But Yeah, he's been kind of, from what I can see, it looks like he's been sort of in and out of the QPR team, maybe not a regular. But what have you made of him as a player, both in his original loan spell and then since he's come back?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think we had him the season after that you guys did the first
Yeah,
time, and I think in between those two spells, he spent some time on loan in Belgium as
yeah,
well. Um, he was absolutely brilliant for us the first time that he signed, and arriving as one of multiple sort of January loan signings, he was exactly what we needed in the middle in terms of adding a bit of rigidity and a bit of experience. And we somehow managed to keep him sort of injury free, which I remember at the time, sort of Norwich fans were cursing slightly because he spent a long time on the sidelines for you guys. But yeah, that season, I mean, he played a massive role in keeping us up. Going into the summer, I was a really big advocate for him returning. I know, so some people have different feelings. He did a job, and maybe it's time to part ways. But he felt like a younger version of, at the time, us having Jack Cole back, and I felt like he could fill that gap in the squad well. There were rumours the summer before last that he was going to be in talks for a return to QPR, but he was on a long-term deal at Newcastle, as you know,
yeah,
and there were still multiple years left. They hadn't reached a conclusion, and I think the price was just too high. And I think any sort of deal that there was meant to be in place sort of fell through fairly last minute. He obviously then spent last season, or the second half of last season, on loan at Portsmouth. Did an absolute job against us at Fratton Park earlier in the year. Really made us rue why we hadn't signed him. And then coming into the summer again, obviously, eventually it became known that he'd resolved his issues with Newcastle and he was leaving as a free agent. And yet we'd still not signed him, and it felt like a really obvious pickup for me.
yeah,
We didn't end up picking him up until after we got thrashed by Coventry. But obviously, there was still some time left in the transfer window, and we signed 3 players the day after that. Some would say that that's a little bit reactionary. I like to think that they were at least on the phone to him before the match.
yeah,
But interestingly, yeah, he's come in. It's added competition in the squad. It's added depth. He's not really had much of a chance to get that many minutes. He came in for the win against Swansea away from home, set up the one and only goal, and yeah, really impressive in that game. But then played against Derby County in the next game, and not so much. So sort of lost his place. Coming back out of the international break, he plays for Jamaica, so I think it's understandable that he's not had any minutes in the sort of past couple of games.
yeah.
But he has added a depth and a competition there. He's only just past 30, so I do think it's good that we have somebody with plenty of Premier League experience in there, and I imagine he'll be doing a job beyond sort of being on the pitch as well.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be interesting to see if he plays any part on Saturday, which does kind of bring me round to the actual game. And I kind of wanted to see how you are feeling about it, because obviously, from a Norwich perspective, fans are feeling absolutely furious about the situation at the moment. They're very disappointed with the results that have been produced this season. Obviously, there's a certain level of optimism from Philippe Clement's arrival, and the fact that he seems to be ever so slightly turning performances. But I wanted to see what what the expectation is from away. I always find that interesting when you look at Norwich at the moment, because typically you look at the kind of championship cliches. It's very easy to say, "Oh, big club at this level," and a lot of, I think every manager who visits Carrow Road says afterwards, "It's a big club. They got great players. It's a decent result." Type thing. But when you look at Norwich, 23rd in the championship table, 6 points from safety on the run of games that they are. QPR have won, obviously, a couple on the spin after the international break. Does it feel like quite a big opportunity?
I'm really conflicted about this one, if I'm being honest. It's funny. I was chatting to your Conor earlier for my preview, and I was saying that back-to-back wins, you've got a chance to make it 3 from 3 in a week, which is something that we very, very rarely do. But I can't help but sort of look at the record as something that puts me off a little bit. QPR haven't won at Carrow Road since 2008, and it's only one win full stop against Norwich in the past 11.
Yeah,
And yeah, Conor made the point that Norwich are happily breaking these records for teams this season. But QPR are doing similar. I mean, we played Ipswich and Southampton both before the break, and both teams that were in desperate need of a win, and came to Loftus Road and got those wins. So yeah, QPR do have a bit of a habit of helping out a side when they need to get their season going. Um, That said, you can't not feel confident off of the back of 2 wins in a row. I think for Rangers, this is really a question of fitness and performance levels and whether that could be maintained. I think in the 3 game weeks before the break, it felt like we were making too many changes. It was sort of 5, 6 changes a game, and I just don't think anyone can pick up any kind of form when you're changing half your side. But over the last couple of games, it's been 2 or 3 changes. So I think it's all about how we decide to go into this one, where we inject those fresh legs. But I must say, I am really shocked at where Norwich are, and I had you guys in the playoffs in my season predictions. I thought that Liam Manning did a really impressive job with Bristol City last season, and I expected that to carry over to Norwich City. So yeah, I find it hard to predict. I mean, this is the thing. I thought, on paper you had a much better squad than us last season, but then we ended up taking 4 points off of Norwich. So it's a really hard one to predict. But yeah, I can't help but feel that the history is slightly against us. But I'm hoping our momentum will kind of counter that.
Yeah, it will definitely be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm going to come to you for your score prediction next, but while I give you a bit of time to think, I'll give mine, because I feel like when you were kind of talking there about some of the factors, not that maybe are going in QPR's favour, because I think those are quite clear to a lot of people, but when you talked about the fact that they've won the last couple of games, I think we've seen from the Championship this season how hard it is to go and win 3 games in a week. It feels like such a tight division that doing that would be difficult. As you said, Norwich are there to make all of these things easy, it seems, for visiting teams this season. But I think there were signs of a decent-ish performance against Oxford. It feels like they have improved ever so slightly under Clement. So given those factors, I'm going to be optimistic from a Norwich perspective and say 2-1, but I wouldn't be completely shocked if it goes the other way. So just covering myself there. But Conor, how do you reckon it's going to play out in terms of the result?
Yeah, so before Blackburn, which is another sort of bogey ground for QPR to visit, I was having very similar considerations in my own preview, but I went brave and I went for a win. Didn't get the score right, but I went for a win and we got a win. So I am going to mirror your score, but in QPR's favour. I'm going 2-1 QPR. You are totally right. It is so hard to put 3 wins together in this league, and not many teams have done it. But I just feel like we've picked up a little bit of confidence and momentum at the right time. And I think if we get those kind of rotations right, I'm hoping that we have a little bit too much for Norwich, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible that you're not far wrong there, but always good to be optimistic. So that's what I went for. Thanks very much, Conor. If people want to see more of your content, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, so my match previews and reactions are available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. And yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at HoopsOrYT as well.
Yeah, we definitely recommend that. And of course, if you're a Norwich fan looking for more content from us, then pinkun.com/subscribe is the place to go. I think we've currently got an offer going on. So go over there and take advantage of that while you can. Thanks very much, everyone, for watching Terrace Talk, and we'll see you for the next one.